There's nothing quite like losing everything you love in a single day. Cal Brennan sat in his empty apartment, staring at the custody papers and pink slip, wondering how a man goes from being a father and provider to having absolutely nothing left. Then came the inheritance nobody wanted, his grandfather's old junkyard. His family called it worthless scrap metal that would kill him before it saved him. The place looked like a graveyard of broken dreams, filled with rusted cars and forgotten memories. But his grandfather had kept a secret. Deep inside a sealed shipping container, hidden beneath years of rust and neglect, lay something incredible. Plans for a device that could change the world and blueprints worth $250 million. Would Cal discover the truth before his enemies found him? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning sun cast long shadows across the Brennan family junkyard as Cal's beat-up Honda pulled through the rusted gates for the first time in 20 years. The property stretched out before him like a metal graveyard, acre upon acre of abandoned vehicles, twisted steel, and forgotten dreams piled high against the Texas sky. His 8-year-old daughter, Ivy, pressed her face to the passenger window, her breath fogging the glass as she took in the overwhelming sight. "It's like a treasure hunt, Daddy," she whispered, her voice filled with the kind of wonder that only children possess when faced with the impossible. Cal wished he could share her optimism. The weight of the custody papers in his jacket pocket felt heavier than all the scrap metal surrounding them. He had exactly one weekend with his daughter before returning her to his ex-wife Sarah, and after that, who knew when he'd see her again? The judge had been clear until Cal could prove stable employment and housing. His visitation rights would remain severely limited. They parked beside a weathered aluminum trailer that had seen better decades. The steps creaked under their weight as Cal fumbled with the keys the lawyer had given him. Inside, the trailer smelled of old coffee and motor oil, but it was clean. His grandfather had always been meticulous, even in his final years. "Grandpa Joe lived here?" Ivy asked, running her small fingers along the worn Formica countertop. "Toward the end, yes." Cal opened the small refrigerator, surprised to find it still stocked with basic supplies. Someone had been maintaining the place. "He used to have a house in town, but after your grandmother passed, he moved out here full-time." The trailer was spartanly furnished, but comfortable narrow bed, a small kitchen table, and built-in storage that made efficient use of every inch. What struck Cal most was how organized everything was. His grandfather had arranged his few possessions with military precision, each item in its designated place. Ivy discovered a wooden box on the kitchen table, filled with old photographs. She pulled out a black-and-white picture of a much younger Joseph Brennan, standing beside what looked like sophisticated laboratory equipment. "Daddy, Grandpa Joe looks like a scientist in this picture." Cal studied the photograph. His grandfather wore a white lab coat and safety glasses, standing in what was clearly a professional research facility. Behind him, partially visible, were complex instruments Cal didn't recognize. He'd never seen this side of his grandfather before. The man he remembered was gruff, practical, more comfortable with a wrench than anything resembling scientific equipment. "That's strange," Cal murmured. "Grandpa Joe always said he was just a mechanic who got lucky buying scrap metal." They spent the morning exploring the immediate area around the trailer. Cal was amazed by the sheer volume of material his grandfather had accumulated over the decades. There were entire sections organized by type automotive parts in one area, industrial machinery in another, and what appeared to be military surplus equipment stacked near the back fence. The neighbors, an elderly couple named Frank and Maria Santos, appeared around noon, carrying a casserole dish and warm smiles. "You must be Calvin," Maria said, her weathered hands steady as she offered the still warm dish. "Your grandfather talked about you often. We're so sorry for your loss." Frank, a man who looked to be in his 70s with calloused hands and kind eyes, gestured toward the sprawling junkyard. "Joe was a good man. Kept to himself mostly, but always willing to help when someone needed a part or a favor." "Did you know him well?" Cal asked, accepting the casserole gratefully. 40 years we've been neighbors, Frank replied. Joe moved here in the 80s, bought this place when it was just empty land, built it up piece by piece. Smartest man I ever knew, though he didn't like to talk about his past much. Maria nodded in agreement. He had books in that trailer: physics, engineering, mathematics. Not what you'd expect from a junkyard owner. And the way he could fix anything, make any machine run better than when it was new. There was something special about your grandfather's mind. He ever mention what he did before the junkyard? Cal asked. Frank and Maria exchanged a meaningful look. Government work, Frank said simply. Defense contractor, I think. But he never talked details. Said some things were better left buried. After the Santos family left, Cal and Ivy continued their exploration. The junkyard was vast, easily 15 acres of organized chaos. His grandfather had created pathways between the towering stacks of metal, almost like streets in a small city. Everything was categorized and, despite appearances, systematically arranged. Ivy had inherited her grandfather's curiosity and her father's stubborn determination. While Cal sorted through paperwork in the trailer, she wandered the aisles of scrap metal, her young mind turning the junkyard into an adventure playground. She discovered a section of old shipping containers that had been converted into storage units, each one containing different types of salvaged materials. "Daddy, come look at this one," she called from near the back of the property. Cal found her standing in front of a shipping container that looked different from the others. While most showed the expected rust and weathering of decades outdoors, this one appeared to have been modified. The original doors had been removed and replaced with heavy steel plates that were welded directly to the frame. What made it particularly unusual was that the welding appeared to have been done from the inside. "How do you suppose someone got out after welding those doors shut?" Ivy asked, her finger tracing the thick weld lines. Cal examined the container more closely. The metalwork was professional grade, far beyond anything a typical junkyard owner would need to know. The steel plates weren't just welded, they were sealed with the kind of precision used in industrial applications where preventing contamination was critical. "Maybe there's another way in," he suggested, though he couldn't see any other openings. They walked around the container's perimeter twice, but found no other access points. The entire structure had been sealed like a vault. Cal noticed numbers painted on one Ender series that didn't match the typical shipping container identification codes. As the afternoon wore on, they discovered more mysteries. In the trailer's small closet, Cal found his grandfather's old work clothes knot, the coveralls you'd expect from a mechanic, but clean pressed shirts and slacks suitable for office work. There was also a lockbox containing documents that made no sense. Insurance papers for equipment Cal had never seen, correspondence with companies whose names meant nothing to him, and receipts for materials that seemed far too expensive for junkyard operations. Most puzzling was a brass key tied with a faded red ribbon. It was clearly importanthis. Grandfather had kept it separate from all other keys, wrapped carefully in tissue paper. But Cal couldn't find anything in the trailer or immediate area that the key might open. Evening was approaching when Ivy made another discovery that would change everything. While Cal prepared a simple dinner on the trailer's small stove, she had wandered back to the mysterious sealed container. When he went to call her for dinner, he found her lying on her stomach, peering underneath the structure. "Daddy, there's something under here, like a door or a hatch." Cal knelt beside her and looked. Sure enough, hidden beneath the container and covered by years of accumulated dirt and debris was what appeared to be a metal access panel. It was small, maybe large enough for a person to crawl through, and secured with a lock that looked familiar. He pulled out the brass key from his pocket. It fit perfectly. The hatch opened to reveal a short tunnel that disappeared into darkness beneath the container. The air that emerged was stale but surprisingly clean, without the musty smell he'd expected from an underground space. "We'll explore this tomorrow," Cal said, though his curiosity was nearly overwhelming. "It's getting dark, and I want to make sure it's safe first." That night, as Ivy slept in the trailer's small bed, Cal sat at the kitchen table, studying the photographs and documents they'd found. Every piece of evidence pointed to the same impossible conclusion: his grandfather had been living a double life. The man who'd raised him to believe in hard work and simple values had been hiding something significant. He thought about the conversation with Frank and Maria: government work, defense contractor, books on physics and engineering, the sealed container, the hidden access tunnel. None of it fit with his memories of the grandfather who'd taught him to change oil and respect the value of honest labor. Cal pulled out his phone and searched for information about Joseph Brennan and government work, but found nothing. He tried searching for the company names from the documents, but most returned no results or led to defunct corporations with no available information. As he prepared for bed, Cal found himself thinking about the last conversation he'd had with his grandfather, just 2 months before the old man's death. Joe had seemed unusually serious, almost urgent, when he'd asked Cal to promise that if anything happened to him, Cal would take care of the junkyard personally rather than selling it immediately. "There are things here that matter more than money," his grandfather had said. "Promise me you'll take the time to understand what I've built before you make any decisions about what to do with it." Cal had agreed, thinking it was just an old man's attachment to his life's work. Now he wondered if his grandfather had been trying to tell him something much more important. The wind picked up outside, causing the metal stacks to creak and sing in the darkness. It was a lonely sound, but somehow comforting. Despite all the uncertainty, despite the crushing weight of his recent failures, Cal felt something he hadn't experienced in months: a sense of purpose. His grandfather had left him this place for a reason, and whatever that reason was, Cal intended to find out. In the morning, he would begin to uncover the truth about Joseph Brennan's secret life. But tonight, with his daughter sleeping peacefully beside him and the vast junkyard standing guard around their small trailer, Cal Brennan allowed himself to hope that maybe, just maybe, this inheritance was the beginning of something better rather than the end of everything he'd ever known. The brass key lay on the nightstand, waiting for tomorrow's revelations. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn air that made everything feel possible. Cal woke to find Ivy already dressed and waiting by the trailer door, her backpack stuffed with the small flashlight and notebook she'd insisted on bringing. "Can we explore the secret tunnel now, Daddy?" Cal couldn't help but smile at her enthusiasm. After months of watching his daughter's spirit dim during the custody proceedings, seeing her excited about something, anything felt like a small miracle. They approached the sealed container with the caution of archaeologists entering an unexplored tomb. Cal had brought proper tools this time: a heavy-duty flashlight, work gloves, and a crowbar in case they needed to clear debris. The morning light revealed details they'd missed the evening before. The container sat on a concrete foundation that extended several feet beyond its perimeter, and the welding work was even more sophisticated than he'd initially thought. "Remember what we talked about," Cal said as he knelt beside the hidden hatch. "We go slow, we stay together, and if anything feels dangerous, we come right back up." The brass key turned smoothly, as if the lock had been recently maintained. The hatch opened with a soft pneumatic hiss that suggested some kind of pressure seal. Cal shined his flashlight into the opening, revealing a short ladder leading down into what appeared to be a small chamber. "It's like a secret base," Ivy whispered, her eyes wide with excitement. Cal went first, testing each rung carefully before putting his full weight on it. The ladder was solid, bolted securely to concrete walls. At the bottom, he found himself in a narrow corridor that ran the length of the container above. The space was surprisingly dry and well ventilated, with electrical conduits running along the ceiling. "Okay, sweetheart, come on down, but hold the rails tight." Ivy descended with the fearless confidence of childhood, immediately beginning to explore the underground space with her flashlight. The corridor led to a heavy door marked with faded yellow and black symbols that Cal recognized as radiation warnings. "Stay back from that door for now," Cal said, though the symbols looked old and the Geiger counter app on his phone showed normal readings. To their right, The corridor opened into a larger chamber that had clearly been used as a workshop. Metal workbenches lined the walls, equipped with precision tools and measuring instruments that looked far more sophisticated than anything belonging in a junkyard. Everything was covered with canvas tarps, as if someone had carefully preserved the space before leaving. Cal pulled back the first tarp, revealing a workbench covered with electronic components and partially assembled devices. The equipment looked decades old, but was in pristine condition. Some pieces he recognized as basic electrical instruments, but others were completely foreign to him. "Daddy, look at all these books." Ivy had discovered a shelf lined with technical manuals and journals. Cal examined the titles: Quantum Mechanics and Field Theory, Advanced Materials Engineering, Electromagnetic Field Manipulation. These weren't the kind of books you'd expect to find in a junkyard owner's collection. "Your grandfather was full of surprises," Cal murmured, opening one of the journals to find pages of handwritten notes in his grandfather's familiar script, but discussing concepts far beyond anything Cal understood. They spent an hour carefully exploring the workshop. Each discovery raised more questions. Why had his grandfather needed a radiation-sealed workshop? What kind of projects required this level of secrecy and sophistication? And most importantly, why had he hidden all of this from his family? Cal was examining a device that looked like a small electrical generator when Ivy called out from across the room. "Daddy, there's another door over here, but it's really heavy." The second door was indeed heavy steel, reinforced and fitted with multiple locking mechanisms. But it wasn't locked. When Cal turned the handle, it opened to reveal what could only be described as a laboratory. The room was larger than the workshop, with proper ventilation systems, industrial lighting, and equipment that looked like it belonged in a university research facility. At the center of the room sat a device unlike anything Cal had ever seen. It was roughly the size of a refrigerator, constructed from polished metal and covered with gauges, switches, and monitoring equipment. Thick cables connected it to banks of what appeared to be specialized batteries or capacitors. "What is it?" Ivy asked, her voice hushed with awe. "I have no idea," Cal admitted, "but I think your great-grandfather was more than just a junkyard owner." The walls were covered with blueprints and technical drawings. Cal couldn't understand most of the diagrams, but the precision and complexity were obvious. These weren't amateur sketches, they were professional engineering drawings, complete with specifications, calculations, and detailed component lists. One blueprint caught his attention because it was larger than the others and mounted in a protective frame. The title read, Quantum Field Energy Extraction Device, Prototype Series 7. Below that, in smaller text, Classification Level, Compartmentalized, DARPA Advanced Research Division. DARPA. Cal knew that name from news reports and movies, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, the military's most secretive research arm. The agency responsible for developing technologies so advanced they seemed like science fiction. "Ivy, sweetheart, I think we need to be very careful about what we've found here." She was examining a glass case that contained what looked like metallic samples or components. Each piece was labeled with codes and dates spanning from the 1980s through the early 2000s. The materials had an unusual appearance, some seemed to shift color depending on the angle of light. Others appeared to generate their own faint luminescence. "These look magical," Ivy said, her face pressed close to the glass. Cal was beginning to understand that they'd stumbled into something far more significant than a junkyard inheritance. His grandfather hadn't just worked for the government, been involved in advanced research projects that were still classified decades later. A sound from above made them both freeze. Footsteps on gravel, moving slowly around the perimeter of the container. Cal motioned for Ivy to stay quiet and turned off his flashlight. The footsteps continued for several minutes, circling the container twice before moving away. "Who was that?" Ivy whispered. "I don't know, but I think we should head back up for now." They made their way back through the workshop and up the ladder, Cal closing and locking the hatch behind them. When they emerged, the junkyard appeared empty, but Cal couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. "Let's go back to the trailer," he said, taking Ivy's hand. "We can explore more later." As they walked back, Cal noticed a black sedan parked on the road outside the junkyard's main gate. The car hadn't been there when they'd arrived that morning. Through the rear window, he could see the silhouette of someone sitting in the driver's seat. Inside the trailer, Cal made lunch while trying to process what they'd discovered. His grandfather had maintained a secret laboratory beneath his junkyard for decades. He'd been involved in classified government research, and now, less than a week after the old man's death, unknown parties were already showing interest in the property. Cal's phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. The caller ID showed his ex-wife's lawyer. "Mr. Brennan, this is Robert Chen. I'm calling to inform you that my client has some concerns about the environment you're exposing Ivy to this weekend." "What kind of concerns?" "The junkyard, Mr. Brennan. It's not exactly a safe place for a child. Sharp metal, unstable structures, potential chemical hazards. Mrs. Brennan is worried about Ivy's safety." Cal looked out the window at his daughter, who was happily drawing pictures of their underground discovery. "The property is safe. We're being careful, and I'm supervising her at all times. Nevertheless, my client wanted me to remind you that any evidence of unsafe conditions could impact future custody arrangements. I trust you understand the implications." The line went dead. Cal stared at his phone, feeling the familiar weight of impossible circumstances pressing down on him. Every time he thought he might have found a path forward, someone appeared to block it. But this time felt different. This time he had something, he just didn't know what it was yet. That afternoon, while Ivy napped in the trailer, Cal returned to the underground laboratory alone. He needed to understand what his grandfather had been working on, and why it had been hidden so carefully. The device at the center of the lab drew his attention like a magnet. It was clearly the focus of all the research, the culmination of whatever project his grandfather had been pursuing. Cal found the device's manual in a filing cabinet, thick binder filled with technical specifications and operational procedures. The language was dense and scientific, but one section caught his attention immediately: energy output calculations. According to the manual, the device was designed to extract energy directly from quantum field fluctuations, a process that could theoretically generate massive amounts of clean power with no fuel input and no waste products. If the calculations were correct, a single unit could power an entire city block indefinitely. Cal read the section 3 times, certain he was misunderstanding something. The implications were staggering. If this technology actually worked, it would revolutionize energy production worldwide. It would make oil, coal, and even traditional renewable energy sources obsolete overnight. No wonder his grandfather had hidden it. As Cal prepared to leave the laboratory, he noticed something else: a security camera mounted in the corner of the ceiling. Its red recording light was still blinking, suggesting the system was still active. Someone, somewhere, might know exactly what he and Ivy had discovered. Walking back to the trailer through the lengthening shadows of the junkyard, Cal realized that his life had just become infinitely more complicated. He was no longer just a broke, divorced father trying to figure out his next move. He was now the guardian of a secret that could change the world or get him killed. The black sedan was still parked outside the gate, waiting. Sunday morning brought an unwelcome visitor. Cal was making coffee when he spotted a man in an expensive suit walking through the junkyard's front gate. The stranger moved with purpose, navigating the maze of scrap metal as if he'd been there before. "Stay inside, sweetheart," Cal told Ivy, stepping out of the trailer to intercept the visitor. The man was in his 50s, well-groomed, with a kind of confident bearing that suggested he was accustomed to getting what he wanted. He extended a business card as he approached. "Mr. Brennan, I'm David Hutchinson, representing Meridian Holdings. I'd like to discuss purchasing your property." Cal glanced at the card. Meridian Holdings was listed as a strategic asset acquisition company with offices in 3 major cities. "The property isn't for sale. I understand you might think that now, but let me share some information that could change your mind. Hutchinson pulled out a tablet and showed Cal aerial photographs of the junkyard. This property sits on a very interesting geological formation. There are mineral rights that could be quite valuable. Mineral rights? Rare earth elements primarily, the kind used in advanced electronics and energy storage systems. My company is prepared to offer you $2 million for the property, as is, with immediate closing. Cal tried to keep his expression neutral, though the number was staggering. $2 million would solve every problem he had: custody lawyers, stable housing, financial security for Ivy's future. It was more money than he'd ever imagined having. I'll need time to think about it. Of course, but I should mention that this offer has a time limit. My company moves quickly when we identify valuable properties. If you're not interested, we'll need to explore other options in the area. Hutchinson's smile was polite, but carried an unmistakable threat. After the man left, Cal spent the morning researching Meridian Holdings online. The company existed, but its website was vague about exactly what they did. Press releases mentioned acquisitions in strategic sectors and advanced technology development, but provided no specific details. More troubling was what he found when he searched for DARPA and Joseph Brennan together. The search returned a single result, a heavily redacted document from 1987 mentioning a J. Brennan in connection with Project Prometheus. Most of the document was blacked out, but Cal could make out references to energy research and classified applications. His phone rang. This time it was his ex-wife, Sarah. "Cal, I've been thinking about Ivy spending time at that junkyard. It doesn't seem safe." "She's fine, Sarah. We're being careful. Robert thinks we should modify the custody arrangement. Maybe supervised visits until you find proper housing." Cal felt his chest tighten. Supervised visits. "Sarah, I'm her father. A father who's been unemployed for 3 months and is now living in a trailer surrounded by potentially hazardous waste." The judge was clear about stability requirements. "Give me some time. I'm working on things." "How much time, Cal? Ivy needs consistency, not adventure." After the call ended, Cal sat on the trailer's small steps, watching his daughter play among the stacks of organized metal. She'd found some old automotive parts and was arranging them into elaborate sculptures, her imagination transforming scrap into art. The weight of impossible decisions pressed down on him. $2 million would guarantee his ability to fight for custody, but it would also mean abandoning whatever his grandfather had entrusted to him. And increasingly, Cal suspected that trust had been very specific and very important. That afternoon, he decided to visit Frank and Maria Santos. He needed to understand more about his grandfather's life, and they were the only people who'd known Joe during his years at the junkyard. He found Frank in his garden, tending to late-season tomatoes. The older man looked up as Cal approached, noting the troubled expression on his face. "Something's weighing on you, son." "Frank, you said my grandfather did government work. Do you know anything specific about what kind of work?" Frank set down his gardening tools and gestured toward 2 lawn chairs in the shade. "Sit down. This might take a while. Your grandfather came here in 1983, bought the land with cash, which raised some eyebrows since it wasn't cheap. He said he was retired from government service, but he was only in his 50s young for retirement. What made you think it was defense work?" "The visitors. First few years, men in government cars would come by regularly. Official-looking types in suits, always serious. Joe would meet with them in that workshop of his. These meetings went on for years, maybe into the early 90s. Maria appeared with glasses of iced tea, settling into a third chair. "Joe was different after those meetings," she said, worried, like he was carrying a heavy burden. "Did he ever talk about his work?" "Once," Frank said. "It was maybe 10 years ago. Joe had been drinking a little, which was rare for him. He said something about working on projects that could change the world, but that some changes weren't worth the cost." "What did he mean?" Maria leaned forward. "He said there were discoveries that needed to be protected from the wrong people, that some knowledge was too dangerous to exist in a world driven by profit and power. Cal thought about the laboratory beneath the container, the sophisticated equipment, the radiation warnings. Frank, did you ever see any unusual activity on the property? People coming and going at odd hours. Until about 5 years ago, yes. But then it stopped completely. Joe became even more private after that. Almost like he was hiding from something. Or protecting something, Maria added quietly. When Cal returned to the junkyard that evening, he found Ivy in the trailer working on a drawing. She'd sketched the underground laboratory with remarkable detail for an 8-year-old, including the mysterious device at its center. I keep thinking about that machine, Daddy. What if it's something really important? What makes you think it's important? Grandpa Joe wouldn't have hidden it so carefully if it wasn't special. And the way it's all set up down there, like a secret scientist's laboratory. Maybe he was working on something that could help people. Cal studied his daughter's drawing. She'd captured something he'd missed. The laboratory wasn't just hidden, it was prepared. Everything was arranged as if someone intended to return and continue the work. The equipment was maintained, the space was clean and organized, and all the research materials were carefully preserved. Ivy, what would you think if someone offered us a lot of money for this place? She looked up from her drawing, her expression serious beyond her years. Are we talking about selling Grandpa Joe's junkyard? Maybe. It might solve some of our problems. But then we'd never find out what the machine does, and maybe Grandpa Joe left it for us to figure out. She returned to her drawing, adding careful details to the mysterious device. Besides, if someone wants to buy it really badly, that probably means it's worth keeping. Out of the mouths of babes. Cal realized his 8-year-old daughter had grasped something that had taken him much longer to understand. His grandfather hadn't just left him a junkyard, he'd left him a responsibility. That night, after Ivy was asleep, Cal returned to the laboratory. He needed to understand more about the device and what his grandfather had been trying to accomplish. The manual was dense and technical, but as he read, certain concepts began to make sense. The quantum field energy extraction system was designed to tap into what physicists called zero-point energy, the background energy that exists in empty space itself. Theoretical physicists had known about this energy source for decades, but no one had ever successfully built a device capable of extracting useful power from it. If his grandfather had solved that problem, the implications were staggering. Clean, unlimited energy with no environmental impact. No fuel costs, no waste products, no dependence on weather or geographic conditions. It would revolutionize everything from transportation to manufacturing to space exploration. But it would also make trillions of dollars worth of existing energy infrastructure obsolete overnight. Cal began to understand why his grandfather had hidden the technology. In the wrong hands, it could destabilize global economics. Energy companies, governments, and military organizations would all want to control it. The technology was too important to be owned by any single entity, but too dangerous to be released without careful consideration. As he prepared to leave the laboratory, Cal noticed something he'd missed before. In the corner of the room, partially hidden behind other equipment, was a small safe. The combination lock looked old but functional. He tried several obvious combinations, birth dates, addresses, important years, but nothing worked. Finally, on impulse, he tried the year his grandfather had bought the junkyard, 1983. The safe opened with a soft click. Inside, Cal found 3 items, a letter addressed to him in his grandfather's handwriting, a small device that looked like a key fob, and what appeared to be a badge or credential from the Department of Defense. The letter was dated just 6 months before his grandfather's death. Calvin, if you're reading this, then I'm gone and you've found the laboratory. I hope you've also found the wisdom to understand what I'm about to tell you. The device in this room represents 30 years of my life's work. It functions exactly as the specifications indicate, and it could change the world for the better. But it could also destroy everything we hold dear if it falls into the wrong hands. I've spent my final years watching corporations and governments become more powerful and less accountable. This technology must not become another tool for concentration of power. I'm trusting you to decide what to do with it because you're the only person I know who values people more than profit. The choice is yours, but choose carefully. The future depends on it. Your grandfather, Joseph. Cal read the letter twice, his hands trembling slightly. His grandfather had known exactly what he was leaving behind, and he'd chosen Cal specifically to inherit this responsibility. The device that looked like a key fob was labeled Emergency Activation Protocol. Cal suspected it was somehow connected to the main energy extraction system, though he wasn't sure he wanted to test that theory yet. But it was the DoD badge that truly shook him. Joseph Brennan hadn't just worked for DARPA, according to the credential. He'd been a senior research director with Level 5 security clearance, the highest level of classification in the Defense Department. As Cal locked the safe and prepared to return to the surface, he realized that the black sedan outside the gate wasn't just curious about his inheritance. Someone knew exactly what Joseph Brennan had hidden in his junkyard, and they were waiting to see what Cal would do with it. Monday morning brought the harsh reality of returning Ivy to her mother. Cal drove through the city streets in silence, his daughter's backpack beside him, still containing the notebook where she'd sketched everything they'd discovered. The weekend had felt like stepping into another world, but now that world seemed dangerously fragile. "Will you be okay at the junkyard by yourself, Daddy?" Ivy asked as they pulled into Sarah's driveway. "I'll be fine, sweetheart, and I'll call you every night, just like always." Sarah was waiting on the front porch, her expression guarded. She walked to the car as Ivy gathered her things, clearly intending to speak with Cal privately. "How was the weekend?" she asked, though her tone suggested she wasn't expecting good news. "Good." Ivy enjoyed exploring the property. "Cal, Robert told me someone's interested in buying that place. Maybe you should consider it. $2 million would solve a lot of problems." Cal felt a chill run down his spine. How did Sarah know about Hutchinson's offer? He'd told no one, except the realized with growing unease that someone must have informed her lawyer about the visit. "Who told you about the offer?" "Does it matter? The point is, you have an opportunity to get back on your feet, to provide the kind of stability Ivy needs." After dropping off Ivy, Cal drove back to the junkyard with more questions than answers. The black sedan was gone, but he couldn't shake the feeling that he was still being monitored. Someone was paying close attention to his decisions, and they had enough influence to reach his ex-wife's lawyer. Back at the trailer, Cal found an envelope that had been slipped under his door. Inside was a business card for Dr. Rebecca Martinez, listed as a technology assessment specialist, along with a handwritten note. "Mr. Brennan, I knew your grandfather. We need to talk. Coffee shop on Main Street, 2 p.m. today. Come alone." Cal spent the morning researching Dr. Martinez online. She was a legitimate scientist, a professor of physics at the State University, with specializations in quantum mechanics and energy systems. Her published papers included several on theoretical energy extraction methods. More significantly, her early career had been spent as a consultant for various government agencies. At exactly 2 o'clock, Cal entered Murphy's coffee shop on Main Street. Dr. Martinez was easy to spot, a woman in her 60s, with graying hair and intelligent eyes, sitting alone in a corner booth with a laptop and several thick books. "You look like your grandfather," she said as Cal sat down. "Same stubborn jaw, same suspicious eyes. Joe said you were the practical one in the family." "You knew him well?" "We worked together for 15 years. I was part of the team that developed the theoretical framework for the quantum field extraction system. Joe was the engineer who figured out how to make it actually work." Cal felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. Finally, someone who could explain what his grandfather had been doing. "The device in the laboratory, does it actually function?" "It functions perfectly. Joe successfully extracted usable energy from quantum field fluctuations in 1994. It was the breakthrough we'd been working toward for a decade." "Then why isn't it powering the world?" Dr. Martinez sighed, stirring her coffee slowly. "Because the world wasn't ready for it. Isn't ready for it, even now." Do you have any idea what unlimited clean energy would do to global economics, to geopolitics? It would solve climate change, end energy poverty. Eventually, yes, but first, it would collapse entire industries, destabilize governments that depend on energy exports, and concentrate unimaginable power in the hands of whoever controlled the technology. Joe understood that. That's why he walked away from the project. Walked away. In 1995, the Department of Defense wanted to weaponize the technology, turn it into a tool for energy warfare, the ability to provide or deny power to entire regions. Joe refused to continue the research under those conditions. Cal thought about his grandfather's letter, the warning about technology falling into the wrong hands. So he stole it. He disappeared it, made it seem like the project had failed, that the theoretical framework was flawed. But he'd already built a working prototype and hidden all the real research. The government spent years trying to recreate his work, but they never succeeded. And now there are multiple parties who would kill to get their hands on Joe's research. Meridian Holdings is just the front company. Behind them are energy corporations, foreign governments, and people who see this technology as the ultimate weapon. Dr. Martinez leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. Cal, your grandfather chose you for a reason. He could have destroyed the technology completely, but he didn't. He preserved it because he believed someday the right person would know what to do with it. I'm not a scientist. I barely understand how it works. You don't need to understand the physics. You need to understand the responsibility. Joe spent 30 years thinking about how to release this technology safely, in a way that benefits humanity rather than concentrating power. All his notes, all his plans for implementation, they're in that laboratory. Cal thought about Ivy's observation that if someone wanted to buy the property badly, it was probably worth keeping. What do you think I should do? I think you should learn everything you can about your grandfather's vision, and then you should be very careful about who you trust. There are people who have been searching for this technology for decades, and they're not going to give up just because Joe is gone. Dr. Martinez handed him a second business card. This is my personal number. Call me if you need help understanding the technical aspects. But be careful who else you contact. There are very few people in this field who can't be bought. That evening, Cal returned to the underground laboratory with new purpose. Armed with Dr. Martinez's insights, he began studying his grandfather's research with deeper understanding. The blueprints weren't just technical specifications, they were a roadmap for changing the world. But as he read through his grandfather's notes, Cal discovered something that made his blood run cold. In a folder marked "Security Concerns," he found evidence that Joseph Brennan had been under surveillance for years. Photographs of the junkyard taken from various angles, records of visitors, even transcripts of phone conversations. Someone had been watching his grandfather closely, waiting for an opportunity to claim the technology, and now they were watching Cal. The final document in the security folder was a list of names people his grandfather identified as threats to the project. David Hutchinson's name was near the top, along with several others Cal didn't recognize. But one name made him feel sick to his stomach: Robert Chen, his ex-wife's lawyer. The custody battle wasn't just about Ivy's welfare, it was about pressuring Cal into selling the property. As Cal prepared to leave the laboratory, he noticed that the security camera's red light was blinking in a different pattern than before. Someone was definitely monitoring the system remotely, but whether that someone was friend or foe remained to be seen. Walking back to the trailer under the star-filled sky, Cal realized that his quiet weekend with Ivy had triggered something much larger than he'd imagined. Forces that had been patient for decades were now moving rapidly to claim his grandfather's legacy. But Cal was no longer the broken, desperate man who'd arrived at the junkyard 3 days earlier. He was Joseph Brennan's grandson, and he was beginning to understand that some things were worth fighting for, regardless of the personal cost. The question was no longer whether he would sell the property. The question was whether he was strong enough to protect what his grandfather had entrusted to him. As he settled into bed, Cal could hear the faint hum of electrical equipment from somewhere beneath the junkyard. The laboratory was still active, still waiting. And tomorrow, he would begin learning how to honor his grandfather's trust and how to keep Ivy safe while doing it. Outside, a different car had taken up position near the gate. The watchers had changed shifts, but they hadn't given up. Cal smiled grimly in the darkness. Let them watch. He was done running from his problems. It was time to start solving them. Tuesday brought an unexpected discovery that changed everything. Cal thought he knew about his grandfather's character. While searching through a filing cabinet in the laboratory, he found a hidden compartment containing Joseph Brennan's personal journal, nearly 300 pages of handwritten entries spanning from 1983 to just weeks before his death. The early entries revealed a man torn between scientific achievement and moral responsibility. Joseph had been genuinely excited about the potential of quantum field energy extraction, writing extensively about how the technology could eliminate poverty, end environmental destruction, and provide unlimited clean power for human advancement. But as the years progressed, the tone of the entries grew darker. March 15, 1994, successful field test today. The device exceeded all expectations, generating 2.3 megawatts of continuous power for 8 hours. Dr. Martinez was beside herself with excitement. We've done it. We've actually done it. But General Morrison's reaction troubles me. He immediately began discussing strategic applications and force projection capabilities. I fear we've created something beautiful that will be used for destruction. Cal continued reading, fascinated and horrified by his grandfather's growing disillusionment with the project's direction. June 2, 1995. The Pentagon wants to build larger units for military bases, then use energy dependency as a diplomatic weapon. They're talking about controlling entire regions by controlling their power supply. This isn't what we intended. This isn't what the world needs. September 18, 1995. I've made my decision. I cannot allow this technology to become another tool of oppression. The research ends here. I've told them the field trials failed, that the theoretical model was flawed. They believe me because they want the simple answer that some things are simply impossible. But Joseph hadn't destroyed the technology. Instead, he'd spent the next 28 years refining it, not for military or corporate use, but for something he called distributed humanitarian implementation. The later journal entries outlined an ambitious vision: small-scale quantum energy units that could be manufactured and maintained locally, owned by communities rather than corporations, and used to provide energy independence to areas that had been underserved by traditional power grids. December 1, 2010, finished the community implementation protocols today. The beauty of this system is its scalability. A single unit can power 50 homes indefinitely. 10 units could handle a small town. And because the technology can be manufactured with commonly available materials, no single entity could maintain a monopoly on production. Cal realized his grandfather hadn't just been hiding the technology, he'd been perfecting it for humanitarian use. The laboratory contained not just the original military-grade prototype, but designs for smaller, safer, more practical versions intended for civilian communities. His reading was interrupted by a knock on the trailer door above. Cal quickly closed the journal, locked the laboratory, and climbed back to the surface. Through the trailer window, he could see a woman in a business suit standing beside a government sedan. "Mr. Brennan, I'm Agent Susan Walsh, Department of Energy. I'd like to discuss your grandfather's property with you." Agent Walsh was professional but not unfriendly, with the kind of direct manner that suggested she was accustomed to getting straight answers. Cal invited her into the trailer, offering coffee while trying to gauge her intentions. "We understand you've inherited some interesting materials along with this property," she said, settling into one of the trailer's small chairs. "Just a lot of scrap metal and old car parts. Mr. Brennan, We both know that's not entirely true. Your grandfather worked on classified projects for the Department of Defense. When he left government service, there were some concerns about research materials that were never properly transferred back to federal custody. Cal kept his expression neutral. I haven't found anything that looks like government property. Perhaps not yet, but if you do, I want you to know that the Department of Energy has programs for safely handling and disposing of sensitive materials. We're not here to create problems for you. We're here to help ensure that potentially dangerous technologies are managed appropriately. Potentially dangerous? Some of the research your grandfather was involved in dealt with experimental energy systems. If mishandled, such technologies could pose risks to public safety. Agent Walsh handed him a business card. If you discover anything unusual, anything that seems beyond normal junkyard materials, please contact me immediately. After she left, Cal called Dr. Martinez from the number she'd given him. They're moving faster than I expected, she said when he described the visit. The Department of Energy showing up means they suspect Joe succeeded with the project. They've probably been monitoring the property since his death, waiting to see what you do. Are they right about the danger? The technology is safe when properly operated, but it does require careful handling. Joe built multiple safety systems into the device, specifically to prevent accidents. Dr. Martinez, I found my grandfather's journal. He had plans for community-based implementation. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. He told you about the humanitarian protocols? You knew. Joe and I stayed in touch over the years. He sent me updates on his work, asked for feedback on his community implementation designs. It was brilliant, Cal. A way to introduce the technology gradually, starting with underserved communities that could benefit most from energy independence. Do you think his plan could actually work? More than that, I think it's the only plan that could work. Release the technology too quickly to major corporations or governments, and you create chaos. But start with small communities, prove the benefits, build public support gradually, and you create unstoppable momentum for positive change. That evening, Cal's carefully controlled world began to unravel. His ex-wife called with news that made his stomach drop. Cal, I've been offered a job in Denver. It's a significant promotion, and the salary would provide much better opportunities for Ivy. Denver? Sarah, that's 1,200 miles away. I know it's difficult, but this is about Ivy's future. Better schools, better healthcare, better opportunities. And what about my relationship with my daughter? You could visit, or maybe this is an opportunity for you to consider relocating as well. With the money from selling that junkyard, you could afford to start over anywhere. Cal realized the pressure campaign had escalated. First the custody threats, then the purchase offers, now geographical separation. Someone was orchestrating events to force him into selling the property. After the call, Cal sat in the gathering darkness outside the trailer, trying to think clearly about his options. He could sell to Meridian Holdings, use the money to follow Sarah and Ivy to Denver, and try to rebuild his life in a new city. It was the safe choice, the practical choice. But it would also mean betraying his grandfather's trust and abandoning a technology that could genuinely help millions of people. His contemplation was interrupted by the sound of vehicles approaching. 3 black SUVs pulled through the junkyard's gate, their headlights cutting through the darkness. Cal's heart raced as armed figures emerged from the vehicles, moving with military precision through the pathways between the scrap metal stacks. This wasn't a business negotiation. This was a seizure operation. Cal grabbed his phone and dialed 911, but found no signal. They were jamming communications. He considered running, but there was nowhere to go. Junkyard was surrounded by open land, and the intruders had night vision equipment. Instead, he did something his grandfather had taught him years ago. He hid in plain sight. The trailer's floor had a hidden compartment where Joseph had stored emergency supplies. Cal lowered himself into the cramped space just as the first intruder reached the trailer door. Through a small ventilation grate, he could watch and listen as the team searched the property. They weren't random criminals. These people knew exactly what they were looking for. They moved directly to the sealed container, bringing cutting equipment and technical scanners. Within minutes, they'd located and opened the hidden hatch. Cal watched in horror as the team descended into his grandfather's laboratory. He could hear voices and equipment moving, but couldn't make out specific words. The operation continued for nearly 2 hours before the team emerged and departed as quickly as they'd arrived. When Cal finally emerged from hiding, he found the junkyard eerily quiet. The laboratory hatch had been left open, and emergency lighting cast strange shadows across the property. He descended into the underground space, dreading what he might find. The laboratory had been professionally ransacked. Every filing cabinet had been emptied, every computer had been removed, and most of the research materials were gone. But surprisingly, the main device remained untouched, along with the manual and several key blueprint sets. It took Cal several minutes to understand why. The intruders had taken everything that would allow them to reproduce the technology, but they'd left the original prototype. Without his grandfather's specific operational knowledge, the device was just an elaborate machine that no one else knew how to operate safely. But they'd overlooked something crucial. Hidden behind a false panel that Cal hadn't even known existed, he found a backup of his grandfather's complete research digital files, photograph copies of all blueprints, and detailed operational procedures. Joseph had anticipated exactly this scenario. Cal also found something else the intruders had missed, a letter addressed to him, dated just 1 week before his grandfather's death. Calvin, if you're reading this after a break, then events are moving as I feared they would. They took the obvious materials but missed the real treasure. Everything they need to understand my work is hidden in the place where we used to fish when you were a boy. You'll know what I mean. The device in this laboratory is functional but incomplete demonstration model. The real prototype, the one that could change everything, is somewhere they'll never think to look. Trust your instincts. Trust Dr. Martinez, and remember that some things are worth fighting for, even when fighting seems impossible. Grandpa Joe. Cal smiled despite the circumstances. He knew exactly what his grandfather meant. When Cal was 12, they discovered a hidden fishing spot beneath an old bridge where 2 creeks converged. Joseph had shown him how to find the secret path and had made him promise never to tell anyone else about their special place. The fishing spot was on the back edge of the junkyard property, where his grandfather had built what appeared to be a simple storage shed for tools and maintenance equipment. But if the pattern held, that shed was probably hiding something much more significant. As Cal locked the laboratory and prepared to investigate the shed, he realized that the night's break-in had actually clarified his situation. Someone wanted his grandfather's technology badly enough to commit serious federal crimes to obtain it. They had influence over his ex-wife's decisions and enough resources to mount sophisticated operations. But they hadn't succeeded. They'd shown their hand without achieving their objective, and now Cal knew he was in a fight that had been years in the making. His grandfather had spent 3 decades preparing for this moment, building not just revolutionary technology, but a comprehensive plan for protecting it until the right time. Cal was beginning to understand that he wasn't just inheriting a junkyard, he was inheriting a war. And for the first time since losing his job and custody battle, Cal felt ready to fight. Wednesday morning found Cal standing before the innocuous tool shed at the back of the property, his grandfather's cryptic message echoing in his mind. The structure looked like every other outbuilding on the junkyard, weathered wood siding, corrugated metal roof, and a simple padlock securing the door. But Cal had learned not to trust appearances where his grandfather's work was concerned. The shed's interior appeared ordinary at first glance. Tools hung neatly on pegboard walls, spare parts filled organized shelves, and a workbench occupied the center of the space. But when Cal examined the floor more carefully, he found what he was looking for: a section of wooden planking that didn't quite match the rest. Prying up the boards revealed a hidden basement that took his breath away. Unlike the cramped laboratory beneath the shipping container, This space was vast and sophisticated. Banks of computer equipment lined the walls, all connected to what appeared to be a much larger and more advanced version of the quantum energy device he'd found earlier. This wasn't a prototype. This was the real thing. The device was beautiful in its complexity, a sleek, cylindrical chamber surrounded by monitoring equipment and control systems that looked decades ahead of anything Cal had seen before. Status lights indicated the system was in standby mode, quietly maintaining itself after years of automated operation. On the central control console, Cal found a note in his grandfather's handwriting. Emergency activation sequence. Red switch first, then blue, then enter code 831 Ivy's birthday. Full operational manual in safe behind workbench. Remember, this technology belongs to humanity, not to those who would use it for control. Cal located the safe and entered the combination. Inside, he found a complete operational manual for what his grandfather had designated as Prometheus Unit 1, the first functional quantum field energy extraction system designed for community deployment. According to the manual, this single unit could generate enough clean energy to power 500 homes indefinitely. The technology was completely scalable. Identical units could be linked together to handle larger populations, or simplified versions could serve individual buildings. Most remarkably, the systems were designed to be manufactured using commonly available materials and maintained by technicians with standard electrical training. Cal spent hours studying the implementation protocols his grandfather had developed. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Start by providing free energy to economically disadvantaged communities, demonstrate the technology's benefits, and gradually expand the network as public support grew. Local ownership and control were built into the system's design. No single entity could monopolize the technology because it could be reproduced by anyone with the proper knowledge. But first, Cal needed to understand whether the device actually worked as promised. Following the manual's instructions carefully, he initiated the startup sequence. The system hummed to life with surprising quietness, various monitors displaying readings that meant nothing to him but appeared to be within normal parameters. After 30 minutes of operation, the device had generated enough electricity to power the entire junkyard with significant excess capacity. More impressive still, the energy output remained perfectly stable, no fluctuations, no fuel consumption, no waste products of any kind. Cal was looking at the solution to humanity's energy problems, hidden beneath a tool shed in rural Texas. His amazement was interrupted by his phone ringing. Dr. Martinez's voice was tense with urgency. "Cal, you need to get out of there immediately. My university office was broken into last night. They took everything related to the quantum field research, including my correspondence with your grandfather." "Who took it?" "I don't know, but it means they're accelerating their timeline. If they're willing to commit crimes this blatant, they're getting desperate." "Dr. Martinez, I found the real prototype. It works exactly like my grandfather said it would." "You found Prometheus Unit 1? Cal, that device represents 30 years of refinement beyond the original laboratory prototype. It's not just functional, it's perfected. What should I do?" "You need allies. People who understand what's at stake and have the resources to help protect the technology. I'm driving down there now, but that's going to take 6 hours. In the meantime, document everything. Take photographs, copy files, make sure the knowledge can survive even if the physical equipment is destroyed." After ending the call, Cal spent the afternoon following Dr. Martinez's advice. He photographed every blueprint, copied every file, and created multiple backups of his grandfather's research. If someone wanted to suppress this technology, they'd have to work much harder than simply stealing a few computers. But as he worked, Cal became aware that he was being watched more closely than before. Vehicles passed the junkyard frequently, slowing down as they approached the gate. A helicopter made several low passes over the property, and twice he spotted figures with binoculars positioned on the hills surrounding the area. The pressure was building toward some kind of confrontation. That evening brought another unwelcome visitor. David Hutchinson returned, this time accompanied by two associates who looked less like businessmen and more like private security. "Mr. Brennan, I hope you've had time to consider our offer," Hutchinson said, though his tone suggested this wasn't really a negotiation anymore. "I told you the property isn't for sale. Circumstances change. I'm now authorized to offer you $5 million for immediate transfer of the property and all its contents." The number was staggering, but Cal had learned enough about his grandfather's work to know the technology was worth far more than any amount of money. "My answer hasn't changed." "That's unfortunate. You see, we know what your grandfather was working on down there. We know you've discovered his laboratory. And we know that technology represents a national security concern that can't be left in civilian hands." National security concern. Unlimited energy production outside government oversight. Imagine what terrorist organizations could do with that capability, or hostile foreign governments. This technology is too dangerous to exist without proper controls. Cal realized Hutchinson was using the same arguments that had driven his grandfather away from the Defense Department 30 years earlier. Some people would always see revolutionary technology as a weapon first, and a benefit to humanity second. "The technology stays here," Cal said firmly. Hutchinson's associates stepped closer, their message clear. "Mr. Brennan, I don't think you understand the gravity of your situation. Your ex-wife is moving to Denver. Your custody rights are in jeopardy. You're unemployed and living in a trailer. $5 million could solve all of those problems instantly. And if I refuse, then your problems are likely to get much worse very quickly." After the men left, Cal called Frank Santos and asked if he and Maria could come over. He needed witnesses, people who could verify what was happening in case something went wrong. When the elderly couple arrived, Cal showed them selected portions of the underground laboratory enough to demonstrate that his grandfather had been involved in important scientific work, but not enough to reveal the full scope of the discovery. "This explains a lot about Joe's behavior over the years," Frank said, examining the sophisticated equipment. "He was carrying some heavy secrets. Frank, I think people are going to try to force me off this property. If anything happens to me, I need you to contact Dr. Rebecca Martinez at the State University. Tell her to implement Joe's protocols." "What kind of protocols?" "The kind that make sure his life's work doesn't end up in the wrong hands." That night, Cal couldn't sleep. He stood in the toolshed basement, looking at the quietly humming Prometheus Unit 1, understanding that he was at a crossroads that would define not just his future, but potentially the future of human civilization. His grandfather had spent 30 years preparing for this moment when someone would have to decide whether revolutionary technology would be used to benefit humanity or to consolidate power in the hands of the few who could afford to control it. Cal thought about Ivy's drawing, her innocent excitement about the secret scientist's laboratory. She'd seen the discovery as an adventure, a treasure hunt that brought them closer together. But she'd also grasped something that had taken Cal much longer to understand. Some treasures are too valuable to sell. Tomorrow would bring new pressures, new threats, and new decisions. But tonight, Cal Brennan made a choice that would have made his grandfather proud. He wasn't going to sell the technology to the highest bidder. He was going to figure out how to use it to build something better. The question was whether he'd live long enough to see it through. Thursday morning brought Dr. Martinez earlier than expected, along with revelations that shattered everything Cal thought he understood about his situation. She arrived in a rental car just after dawn, her usually composed demeanor replaced by obvious agitation. "Cal, we need to talk immediately. I've discovered something about your grandfather's death that changes everything." They sat in the trailer while Dr. Martinez opened her laptop, pulling up documents that made Cal's blood run cold. "Joseph didn't die of natural causes," she said quietly. "I've been investigating since the break-in at my office, and I found medical records that don't match the official death certificate." "What do you mean?" "The coroner's report says heart failure, but Joe's personal physician had given him a clean bill of health just 2 weeks before he died. More importantly, I found this. She showed Cal a series of photographs taken by traffic cameras near his grandfather's house on the day he died. The images showed a suspicious vehicle parked outside for several hours, with occupants who appeared to be conducting surveillance. Someone was watching him closely in his final days. And there's more. Dr. Martinez pulled up another document. I contacted a friend at the Department of Energy. Agent Walsh isn't who she claims to be. There's no Susan Walsh in their employ, and the credentials she showed you are fake. Cal felt the world shifting beneath his feet. Then who is she? Most likely corporate intelligence. Probably working for the same people behind Meridian Holdings. Dr. Martinez closed the laptop and looked directly at Cal. Your grandfather wasn't just hiding the technology from the government, he was hiding it from people who had already killed to obtain it. The implication hit Cal like a physical blow. His grandfather had been murdered because he wouldn't reveal the location of his research. And now the same people were circling Cal, using increasingly desperate methods to force him into giving up the technology. There's something else you need to know, Dr. Martinez continued. I found records of your grandfather's real planet, just the community implementation protocols, but his exit strategy. Exit strategy? Joe knew they would eventually find him. So he spent the last 5 years of his life creating what he called distributed security. He didn't just hide one prototype, built multiple units and placed them with trusted people around the world. Dr. Martinez showed Cal a map with locations marked in 7 different countries. There are Prometheus units in rural communities in Brazil, Kenya, Bangladesh, and 4 other locations. Each one is controlled by local people who understand the technology's value but have no connection to military or corporate interests. He was building a network. More than that, he was creating an insurance policy. Even if they destroy this facility and kill everyone who knows about it, the technology will survive in communities that can demonstrate its benefits to the world. Cal studied the map, beginning to understand the true scope of his grandfather's vision. Joseph hadn't just been developing revolutionary technology, he'd been orchestrating a global transformation that could bypass traditional power structures entirely. But here's the crucial part. Dr. Martinez continued, all of those units require periodic synchronization with a master control system to remain operational. Without that synchronization, they'll shut down within 6 months. Let me guess, the master control system is here. It's integrated into Prometheus Unit 1. Your grandfather made this facility the keystone of the entire network. If this unit is destroyed or falls into the wrong hands, every other unit worldwide will automatically disable itself. Cal realized why the pressure to control his property had become so intense. It wasn't just about one prototype, it was about a global network of revolutionary technology that could render traditional energy companies obsolete overnight. Dr. Martinez, who else knows about this network? Your grandfather was extremely careful about information security. I only know because he needed scientific consultation on some technical issues. But there are indications that certain intelligence agencies have suspected something like this existed. That's why they killed him. They tortured him first. Martinez said quietly, the medical evidence suggests he was interrogated for hours before his death. But Joe never revealed the network's locations or the synchronization protocols. Cal thought about his grandfather's final letter, the careful way he'd hidden information that only Cal would understand. Joseph had endured torture and death to protect not just the technology, but the communities worldwide who were depending on it for their energy independence. What happens if I activate the master control system? According to Joe's notes, activation sends authorization codes to all network units, allowing them to operate independently for another 5 years. It also transmits complete technical specifications to trusted partners worldwide, ensuring the technology can't be suppressed even if this facility is destroyed. And if I don't activate it? The network shuts down in 4 months, and 30 years of work dies with it. Millions of people who could have benefited from clean, unlimited energy continue to suffer from energy poverty. Cal walked to the trailer window, looking out over the junkyard that had become the center of a global struggle he'd never asked to join. In the distance, he could see vehicles positioned on the surrounding hills, more watchers, more pressure, more people who wanted to control his grandfather's legacy. His phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "You have 48 hours to accept our offer. After that, we pursue alternative methods of acquisition." Cal showed the message to Dr. Martinez, who grimaced. "They're done being subtle. Expect the pressure to intensify dramatically." "What kind of pressure?" "Legal challenges to your ownership of the property, accusations of possessing stolen government property, threats to your daughter's safety. They'll use every tool available to force you into compliance. Then I need to act quickly. Cal, once you activate that master control system, there's no going back. You'll be declaring war against some very powerful interests. Are you prepared for that?" Cal thought about Ivy's excitement when she'd discovered the sealed container, her innocent faith that her great-grandfather had left them something wonderful. He thought about the communities around the world who were already benefiting from Joseph's technology, trusting that someone would maintain the network that powered their homes and schools and hospitals. He thought about his grandfather, dying alone rather than betraying the people who depended on him. "Dr. Martinez, can you help me understand how to operate the master control system safely?" Joe left very detailed instructions. "But Cal, you need to understand what activation means. Every intelligence agency in the world will know within hours that the network is active. They'll descend on this location with everything they have. Then we'd better make sure the technology is properly protected before that happens." They spent the afternoon in the hidden basement, Dr. Martinez explaining the intricacies of the quantum field extraction system, while Cal familiarized himself with the control protocols. The technology was more elegant than he'd imagined. Once activated, the units were essentially self-maintaining, requiring only basic monitoring and occasional component replacement. "Your grandfather designed these systems to be operated by communities, not corporations," Dr. Martinez explained. "The technology itself prevents monopolization. Anyone with basic technical training can build and maintain a unit using his specifications." "What about patents, intellectual property rights?" Joe deliberately never filed patents. He published all of his theoretical work in academic journals under different names and false research contexts. The knowledge belongs to humanity, not to any individual or organization. As evening approached, Cal made his decision. He would activate the master control system that night, ensuring that his grandfather's global network could continue operating regardless of what happened to him personally. But first, he needed to take one more precaution. He called Frank Santos and asked him to bring Maria to the junkyard immediately. "I need witnesses," Cal explained when they arrived. "People who can verify what happens here tonight." He led them to the hidden basement, watching their faces as they absorbed the scope of Joseph Brennan's secret work. Frank whistled low as he examined the Prometheus unit. Joe always said he was working on something that would help ordinary people. Guess he wasn't exaggerating. "Frank, Maria, I'm going to activate this system tonight. If anything happens to me afterward, I need you to contact Dr. Martinez and tell her to proceed with something called Protocol 7. Can you remember that?" "Protocol 7, Maria repeated. "But Cal, what exactly are you expecting to happen?" "I'm expecting people to try very hard to stop me from doing what my grandfather trusted me to do." Cal positioned himself at the master control console, Dr. Martinez beside him, to provide technical guidance. Frank and Maria stood ready to document everything with their phones. "Red switch first," Dr. Martinez said quietly. Cal flipped the red switch. Banks of equipment throughout the basement came alive with soft humming and blinking lights. Blue switch. The Prometheus unit itself began to glow with internal energy, its cylindrical core spinning slowly as quantum field extraction systems engaged. "Now, enter the code." Cal typed 831 into the console keypad. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then displays around the room began showing connection status with locations around the world: Brazil online, Kenya online, Bangladesh online, all 7 network sites reporting successful synchronization. "It's done," Dr. Martinez said, her voice filled with emotion. "Joe's network is secure for another 5 years." But their celebration was short-lived. Through the basement's small ventilation grates, they could hear vehicles approaching, many vehicles, moving fast. Cal's 48-hour deadline had apparently been shortened. "Everyone out," Cal said urgently. "Use the back exit." As they climbed the ladder to the tool shed, Cal could see lights converging on the junkyard from multiple directions. This wasn't another covert operation, this was an all-out assault designed to secure the property by force. But his grandfather had anticipated this scenario too. Hidden throughout the junkyard were automated systems that Cal was only beginning to understand: security measures, communication equipment, and backup power systems that could operate independently of the main grid. Joseph Brennan had turned his junkyard into a fortress, and he'd left Cal the keys to defend it. As armed figures began moving through the pathways between stacked metal, Cal realized that the real battle for his grandfather's legacy was just beginning. But for the first time since inheriting the property, he felt prepared for whatever came next. The technology was secure, the network was active, and Cal Brennan was done being pushed around by people who thought power came from money and threats. It was time to show them what real power looked like. The siege of Brennan's junkyard began at midnight on Thursday with a coordinated assault that would have impressed military strategists. Cal watched from the tool shed's concealed observation post as 3 separate teams moved through the property with night vision equipment and sophisticated communications gear. These weren't corporate security guards, they were professionals with military training and equipment. But Joseph Brennan had spent 30 years preparing for exactly this scenario. As the first team approached the trailer, motion sensors triggered a series of floodlights that illuminated the entire junkyard like a stadium. Simultaneously, hidden speakers throughout the property began broadcasting a recorded message in Joseph's voice. "You are trespassing on private property that contains experimental technology protected under federal law. Your activities are being recorded and transmitted to multiple agencies. Withdraw immediately." The assault teams hesitated, clearly surprised by the sophisticated security response. Cal used the confusion to implement the next phase of his grandfather's defense plan. Hidden throughout the junkyard were what Joseph had called distraction protocols, automated systems designed to create chaos and confusion among attackers. Cal activated them using a control panel built into the tool shed's basement. Immediately, car alarms began sounding randomly throughout the property. Hydraulic systems lifted sections of stacked metal, creating new barriers and blocking established pathways. Most dramatically, several old vehicles began moving on their own, their engines controlled remotely as they repositioned themselves to create additional obstacles. "What the hell is this place?" Cal heard one of the attackers shout over the cacophony. Dr. Martinez, Frank, and Maria had taken shelter in the basement while Cal coordinated the defense from his grandfather's command post. The tool shed's basement contained monitoring equipment that provided complete surveillance coverage of the property. Joseph had installed cameras and sensors in dozens of concealed locations. "Cal," Dr. Martinez called from below, "the network is showing unusual activity. Units in 3 countries are reporting attempted infiltration." Cal realized the assault on his property was just one part of a coordinated global operation. Someone was making a simultaneous play for all of Joseph's hidden technology. Can they shut down the remote units? Not without the master codes, which only exist here, but they can damage or destroy the physical equipment. Cal made a decision that his grandfather had hoped would never be necessary. He activated what Joseph had called the Prometheus Protocol, a complete data dump that would transmit all technical specifications, operational procedures, and manufacturing instructions to a network of universities, humanitarian organizations, and independent scientists worldwide. Within minutes, Joseph Brennan's life work would be in the hands of hundreds of people who understood its value and were committed to using it responsibly. But the protocol came with a cost. Once initiated, it couldn't be stopped, and it would make Cal's location visible to anyone monitoring quantum field energy signatures worldwide. He would become a target for every government and corporation that wanted to control the technology. Prometheus protocol activated, Cal announced to Dr. Martinez. No going back now. The assault teams had regrouped and were using cutting equipment to breach the sealed shipping container, apparently still believing the main laboratory was located there. Cal let them waste time on the decoy while he prepared for the real confrontation. His phone rang. The caller ID showed Sarah's number, but the voice that answered wasn't his ex-wife. "Mr. Brennan, this is someone who has been trying very hard to resolve this situation peacefully. Your ex-wife and daughter are currently our guests. They're safe, but their continued safety depends on your cooperation." Cal's vision went red with rage. "If you hurt them, no one wants to hurt anyone. We simply need you to transfer ownership of your property to Meridian Holdings. Sign the papers, and your family goes home safely. Let me talk to them." "Daddy?" Ivy's voice came through the phone, small and frightened. "There are some people here who say they need to talk to you about Grandpa Joe's secret." Cal forced his voice to remain calm. "Are you and Mommy okay, sweetheart?" "We're okay, but I'm scared. They have guns, Daddy." The line went dead. Cal stared at his phone, feeling something fundamental shift inside him. They'd made this personal now. They'd threatened his daughter. "Doctor." Martinez was monitoring the global network status when warning alerts began flashing across multiple screens. "Cal, we have a problem. The Kenya unit just went offline. So did the one in Bangladesh. They're destroying the network. 2 units down, 5 still active, but they're moving fast." Cal realized he was facing a classic hostage situation, but on a global scale. They had his daughter, and they were systematically destroying technology that provided energy independence to communities worldwide. Thousands of people would lose power, schools would close, hospitals would shut down. But his grandfather had prepared for this scenario too. "Dr. Martinez, is there a way to transfer master control authority to one of the remote sites?" Joe built that capability into the system, but it requires physical presence at this facility to initiate the transfer. And once master control is transferred, this facility becomes redundant. Meaning? Meaning it can be destroyed without affecting the network's operation. Cal understood his grandfather's final strategy. The Brennan Junkyard facility was designed to be sacrificialite, could protect the global network long enough to establish independent control, then destroy itself to prevent the technology from being captured. But first, Cal needed to get his daughter back. He called the number that had been used to threaten him, putting the call on speaker so Dr. Martinez could hear. "I'll sign your papers," Cal said when the same voice answered. "But I want to see my daughter first. Meet me at the Junkyard office in 1 hour." "You're in no position to make demands, Mr. Brennan. I'm in the only position that matters. I'm sitting next to the master control system for technology you've spent decades trying to find. You can destroy me, but you can't force me to give you the access codes you need to operate it safely." There was a long pause. 1 hour. Come alone." Cal turned to Dr. Martinez, Frank, and Maria. "I need you to implement transfer protocol the moment I leave this basement. Give master control to the Brazil site. They have the most advanced technical support structure." "Cal, if you leave now, you might not come back," Frank said. "I know, but my daughter is more important than any technology, no matter how revolutionary." Cal pulled out a manila envelope he'd prepared earlier. "This contains copies of everything: my grandfather's journals, technical specifications, operational procedures. If something happens to me, make sure these reach the right people." "Who are the right people?" Maria asked. "Anyone who believes energy should serve humanity instead of controlling it." Dr. Martinez gripped his arm. "Your grandfather would be proud of the choice you're making, but he'd also want you to be smart about it. This facility has capabilities you haven't discovered yet. Joe didn't just build a laboratory, he built a fortress. She led Cal to a section of the basement he hadn't explored, revealing additional control systems that managed what could only be described as defensive measures. The junkyard's seeming chaos was actually a carefully designed maze with multiple choke points, escape routes, and hidden positions. Your grandfather was a military engineer before he was a physicist, Dr. Martinez explained. He designed this place to be defensible against exactly the kind of assault we're facing. Cal studied the defensive control systems, beginning to understand that he had options beyond simple surrender. His grandfather had spent decades turning a junkyard into something approaching a military installation, hidden in plain sight. Dr. Martinez, how long do you need to complete the control transfer? 20 minutes, maybe 30. Then I'm not meeting them in an hour. I'm going to make them come to me on my grandfather's terms. Cal activated the junkyard's full defensive protocol. Barriers rose between the stacks of metal, creating a maze with only one clear path to the tool shed. Hidden weapons systems came online, not lethal weapons, but electromagnetic pulse devices that could disable vehicles and communications equipment. Most importantly, the facility's broadcast systems connected to emergency services, media outlets, and Dr. Martinez's contacts at universities worldwide. "Ladies and gentlemen," Cal said into the broadcast system, "you are witnessing an attempt by corporate and government forces to suppress technology that could provide clean, unlimited energy to communities worldwide. My name is Calvin Brennan, and I am the guardian of research developed by my grandfather, Joseph Brennan, former DARPA scientist and humanitarian visionary." The broadcast was being recorded and transmitted live to multiple locations. Whatever happened next would have witnesses around the world. Cal's phone rang. The kidnapper's voice was tight with anger. "Mr. Brennan, you're making this much more difficult than necessary." "I'm making it exactly as difficult as it needs to be. You want my grandfather's technology? Come and take it. But do it in front of the entire world, and explain to everyone why you're willing to kill for the right to control unlimited clean energy. You're forcing." The sound of sirens pierced the night air just as the assault teams breached the tool shed's outer defenses. Cal's grandfather had timed his distress. Signals perfectly local law enforcement arrived just as the situation reached its most critical point, forcing the attackers to choose between completing their mission and avoiding arrest. Through the basement's perimeter cameras, Cal watched FBI vehicles surround the property while helicopters swept the area with searchlights. The assault teams found themselves caught between a fortified basement and federal agents demanding immediate surrender. Agent Susan Walshaw, whoever she really was, emerged from one of the black SUVs with her hands raised, clearly hoping to convince the FBI that she represented legitimate government authority. But Cal's emergency communicator was already transmitting her real identity to law enforcement agencies worldwide. "This is FBI Special Agent Caroline Ross," came a voice through the tool shed's communication system. "Mr. Brennan, if you can hear this, we need you to respond. We have reports of armed trespassers on your property." Cal activated the basement's external speaker system. "Agent Ross, this is Calvin Brennan. I'm secured in a underground facility on the property. There are hostile forces attempting to steal classified research materials that belong to my grandfather. Are you injured? I'm safe for now, but they're holding my daughter and ex-wife hostage to force my cooperation. We're tracking the hostage situation. Denver police have located your family. They're safe, and the kidnappers are in custody." Cal felt a wave of relief so intense it nearly knocked him down. Ivy was safe. Whatever happened next, his daughter would be protected. "Mr. Brennan, we need you to exit the facility so we can secure the scene." "Agent Ross, the people attacking this property have already killed once to obtain my grandfather's research. I'm not coming out until I'm certain the technology is protected." "What kind of technology?" Cal made a decision that would change everything. "Agent Ross, My grandfather developed a quantum field energy extraction system that can provide unlimited clean power with no fuel input and no environmental impact. The research represents 30 years of classified government work that he preserved for humanitarian purposes. Through the cameras, Cal could see the FBI agents exchanging glances. This was clearly beyond anything they'd expected to encounter at a routine property dispute. "Mr. Brennan, I'm going to need you to repeat that for our technical specialists." Over the next hour, Cal found himself conducting an impromptu technical briefing for FBI agents, Department of Energy officials, and university scientists who had been hastily connected to the situation via secure communications. The global broadcast of technical specifications had triggered responses from scientific communities worldwide, creating enormous pressure for transparent handling of the discovery. Dr. Martinez returned through the emergency tunnel, accompanied by additional university researchers who had driven through the night after receiving the Prometheus protocol data transmission. The basement became a command center as scientists verified the technology's authenticity, while law enforcement agencies sorted through the competing claims of various government and corporate representatives. "Mr. Brennan," Agent Ross called through the communication system, "we've arrested 12 individuals on charges ranging from trespassing to possession of military-grade weapons. But we have representatives from multiple federal agencies who claim jurisdiction over your grandfather's research." "What kind of representatives?" "Department of Defense, Department of Energy, CIA, and several people who claim to represent national security interests but won't provide specific credentials." Cal realized the situation had attracted every entity that had been searching for his grandfather's technology. Now they were all converging on the Junkyard, each claiming the right to control what happened next. But Cal had an advantage they didn't expect. The Prometheus protocol had made Joseph Brennan's research public domain. Technical specifications were already being analyzed by universities, humanitarian organizations, and independent scientists in dozens of countries. The technology could no longer be suppressed or monopolized. "Agent Ross, I'm prepared to exit the facility and cooperate fully with your investigation. But first, I need guarantees that the technology will be handled transparently, with full public disclosure and international oversight. That's beyond my authority to promise." "Then get someone with appropriate authority, because I'm not surrendering revolutionary technology to people who killed my grandfather to obtain it." Through the cameras, Cal watched as a new vehicle arrived, a simple sedan that looked distinctly out of place among the military-style vehicles surrounding the property. From it emerged a woman in her 70s, moving with the confident bearing of someone accustomed to being obeyed. Dr. Martinez looked at the monitor and smiled. "Cal, I think your situation just improved dramatically." "Who is that?" "Dr. Helen Crawford, Nobel Prize winner in physics and former science advisor to 3 presidents. If she's here, it means the scientific community is taking this very seriously." Cal activated the external speakers. "Dr. Crawford, this is Calvin Brennan. My grandfather left instructions that if this technology was ever discovered, it should be placed under international scientific oversight to ensure it benefits humanity rather than concentrating power." Dr. Crawford's voice came through clearly despite the chaos around her. "Mr. Brennan, I've spent the last hour reviewing the technical specifications your grandfather transmitted worldwide. This technology represents the most significant scientific breakthrough since nuclear fission. It absolutely must be handled with complete transparency and international cooperation. Can you guarantee that?" "I can guarantee that the global scientific community will not allow this discovery to be suppressed or weaponized. Too many people now know what your grandfather accomplished. The secret is out, and it's too important to be owned by any single entity." For the first time since the crisis began, Cal felt genuine hope. His grandfather's strategy had worked. The technology was now protected by the very transparency that Joseph had spent his life working toward. Cal emerged from the basement to find the junkyard transformed into something resembling a small military base. Federal agents secured the perimeter, while scientists from 3 universities examined the technology his grandfather had spent decades perfecting. The contrast was surreal revolutionary quantum physics being studied amid towers of rusted automobiles and forgotten machinery. Dr. Crawford approached him with the measured pace of someone who understood the magnitude of what they were witnessing. "Mr. Brennan, your grandfather's work is extraordinary. But more than that, his implementation strategy shows remarkable wisdom. He understood that transformative technology requires social preparation, not just scientific achievement. You've had time to study his community protocols. I've spent my career observing what happens when revolutionary discoveries are controlled by military or corporate interests. Your grandfather's approach gradual implementation through local communities, open-source technical specifications, distributed ownership, it's exactly what this technology needs to succeed." Agent Ross joined them, carrying a folder thick with legal documents. "Mr. Brennan, we've identified the parties responsible for tonight's assault. The good news is that your daughter and ex-wife are completely safe. The bad news is that we're dealing with a conspiracy involving multiple corporations, foreign intelligence services, and several individuals within our own government. What happens now? Now we have a problem that's never existed before. We have revolutionary technology that's already in the public domain, being used by communities worldwide, with no legal framework for determining ownership or control." Dr. Crawford smiled. "Actually, Agent Ross, I think Mr. Brennan's grandfather solved that problem quite elegantly. The technology belongs to humanity because he made sure it couldn't belong to anyone else." Cal looked around the junkyard, seeing it with new eyes. What had appeared to be random accumulation of scrap metal was actually a carefully designed research facility that had protected world-changing technology for 3 decades. His grandfather had been preparing for this moment since before Cal was born. "Dr. Crawford, what's the next step?" "The next step is implementation. Your grandfather left detailed protocols for expanding the community network safely and sustainably. With proper international coordination, we could begin providing energy independence to underserved populations worldwide within 18 months. And the people who tried to steal the technology?" Agent Ross consulted her folder. "They'll face federal charges for conspiracy, kidnapping, assault, and attempted theft of research materials. But more importantly, their employers, the corporations and government entities behind this operation, will face intense scrutiny now that the technology is public knowledge." Cal's emergency communicator buzzed with an incoming transmission from the Brazil Command Center. Dr. Martinez answered, putting the call on speaker for everyone to hear. "This is Dr. Santos in Sao Paulo. Network status report. All remaining units are operational and secure. We've also received technical verification from sites in 12 countries that have successfully reproduced the basic technology using transmitted specifications. The quantum field energy extraction system is now proven and distributable worldwide." Dr. Crawford turned to Agent Ross. "Agent, I believe this situation has moved beyond law enforcement jurisdiction. We're now dealing with a scientific discovery that requires international cooperation and oversight. What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting that Mr. Brennan's grandfather has presented humanity with the most important choice we've faced since the development of nuclear weapons. Do we allow this technology to be controlled by existing power structures, or do we use it to create something better?" Cal thought about his grandfather's journal entries, the years of careful planning, the global network of communities that were already benefiting from clean, unlimited energy. Joseph Brennan had spent his final decades ensuring that when this moment came, the choice would be obvious. "Dr. Crawford, my grandfather left specific instructions for technology transfer. He wanted the research to be managed by an international consortium of universities and humanitarian organizations. No government ownership, no corporate control, no military applications. That's exactly what the global scientific community has been hoping for," Dr. Crawford replied. "We can establish oversight protocols within weeks." Agent Ross looked skeptical. The federal government isn't going to simply walk away from technology this significant. The federal government doesn't have a choice, Cal said firmly. The technology is already operating independently in multiple countries. The research specifications are in the hands of universities worldwide. And my grandfather designed the systems to resist centralized control. Mr. Brennan is correct, Dr. Crawford added. This technology cannot be suppressed or monopolized because it's now distributed globally. The only question is whether we implement it responsibly or allow chaos to emerge from competing attempts at control. Cal activated the basement's main display screen, showing the global network status. 7 active sites, 47 institutions with complete technical specifications, and 12 countries where independent verification was already underway. Agent Ross, this is what my grandfather worked 30 years to achieve. Energy independence for communities that need it most, technology that can't be weaponized or monopolized, and a future where clean power is a human right rather than a corporate commodity. Looking around the basement at the assembled scientists, law enforcement officials, and monitoring equipment, Cal realized his grandfather's vision was becoming reality. The technology would survive because it had been protected by transparency rather than secrecy. Joseph Brennan had understood something that eluded most scientists and engineers. Revolutionary technology succeeds not when it's perfectly designed, but when it's perfectly released. The quantum field energy extraction system was no longer a secret hidden in a junkyard. It was humanity's next step toward energy independence, protected by the very openness that most people feared. Cal's grandfather had won his war against those who would control the future by ensuring that the future belonged to everyone. 6 months later, Cal stood in the same spot where he'd first discovered his grandfather's sealed container. But everything else had changed beyond recognition. The Brennan Junkyard had been transformed into the Joseph Brennan Center for Community Energy Independence, a research and training facility that welcomed visitors from around the world. The rusty shipping containers now housed classrooms where engineers learned to build and maintain quantum field energy extraction systems. The tool shed basement had become a museum displaying the original Prometheus unit, one alongside documentation of Joseph Brennan's 3-decade journey from classified military research to humanitarian technology. Distribution. Ivy ran through the pathways between organized metal stacks, no longer seeing scrap and rust, but understanding that her great-grandfather had built something that was helping people everywhere. Her weekend visits had become permanent residence after Sarah decided to relocate to Texas, drawn by job opportunities in the emerging clean energy sector. "Daddy, the kids from Kenya are going to video call our class this afternoon," Ivy announced, bursting into the center's main office where Cal was reviewing expansion plans with Dr. Martinez. The Kenyan connection was particularly meaningful. The Prometheus unit there had been restored after the assault, and the local community had used it to power their first computer lab, connecting rural students to educational opportunities they'd never had before. Similar stories were emerging from Brazil, Bangladesh, and other network sites worldwide. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. What are they going to show you?" "Their new water purification system. They built it using power from Grandpa Joe's machine, and now they have clean water for the first time ever." Cal smiled, remembering his grandfather's journal entries about the ripple effects of energy independence. Clean power led to clean water, better healthcare, improved education, and economic opportunities that had been impossible before. Joseph had understood that energy wasn't just about electricity, it was about human potential. Dr. Martinez looked up from her laptop, where she was coordinating with the 43 countries that now had active quantum field energy projects. "Cal, I just received confirmation from the United Nations. They're formally recognizing community energy independence as a fundamental human right, with enforcement protocols based on your grandfather's open-source model." "What does that mean practically?" "It means any community can request technical assistance to build their own energy systems, and no government or corporation can legally prevent them from doing so." Your grandfather's technology has essentially made energy poverty illegal under international law. The legal framework had been crucial to the technology's success. Dr. Crawford and her colleagues had spent months working with international organizations to establish protocols that protected the quantum field extraction technology from corporate or military appropriation while ensuring its safe, responsible deployment. Cal's phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Ivy's science fair project won first place. She explained quantum field theory to a panel of judges who probably didn't understand half of what she said, but they were amazed by her presentation. She's definitely got the Brennan family brain. The irony wasn't lost on Cal. His daughter was now more knowledgeable about advanced physics than most graduate students, having spent months learning about her great-grandfather's work from some of the world's leading scientists. She'd become an unofficial ambassador for the technology, explaining to visitors how Grandpa Joe's energy machine worked with the kind of clarity that only children possess. Frank Santos appeared in the office doorway, carrying a newspaper with a headline that still amazed Cal every time he saw it. Community Energy Revolution reaches 100 sites worldwide. The elderly man had become the center's unofficial historian, documenting the transformation from Junkyard to global research facility. Cal, you've got more visitors. This time it's a delegation from Australia. They want to establish a network of quantum units for their remote Aboriginal communities. The visitors had become a constant presence. Engineers, humanitarian workers, government officials, and community leaders from around the world came to learn about Joseph Brennan's technology and how to implement it in their own regions. Cal had gone from unemployed and desperate to serving as director of an international center for energy independence. But the most meaningful transformation had been personal. The custody battle that had once seemed insurmountable had been resolved when Sarah realized that Cal had found his true calling. He wasn't just managing inherited property anymore. He was carrying forward his grandfather's vision for a better world. Mr. Brennan, a young woman approached the office, carrying a small device that Cal recognized as a simplified version of the quantum field extraction system. I'm Maria Santos Frank's granddaughter. I just graduated from engineering school, and I've been working on a portable version of your grandfather's technology for disaster relief applications. Cal examined the device, marveling at how young engineers were already improving and adapting Joseph's original designs. The technology was evolving exactly as his grandfather had intended, through open collaboration rather than proprietary development. How much power can it generate? Enough to run emergency medical equipment or communication systems indefinitely. We're testing it with relief organizations for deployment in areas affected by natural disasters. Dr. Martinez looked up from her coordination work. Maria, that's brilliant. Your design could provide emergency power in situations where traditional generators are impractical or too expensive. As the afternoon progressed, Cal found himself in the basement museum, standing before the original Prometheus unit, one that had started everything. The device still hummed quietly, now providing power to the entire research center while serving as a demonstration model for the thousands of visitors who came to understand quantum field energy extraction. Ivy joined him, carrying her latest drawing, a picture of communities around the world connected by lines of light representing the global energy network. Daddy, do you think Grandpa Joe knew his machine would help so many people? I think he hoped it would, sweetheart. But I also think he knew it would take someone like you to help make sure it happened the right way. Someone like me. Someone who sees possibilities instead of problems. Someone who believes in sharing rather than hoarding. Someone who understands that the best treasures are the ones you give away. Cal looked around the basement that had once been his grandfather's secret laboratory, now transformed into a place where the future was being built by people who understood that technology's highest purpose was serving humanity. Outside, he could hear the sounds of construction as additional research facilities were being built to accommodate the growing global interest in community energy independence. The junkyard that had once symbolized forgotten dreams had become the launching point for humanity's next great leap forward. Joseph Brennan's vision had been realized not through corporate boardrooms or government contracts, but through the simple recognition that some discoveries belong to everyone. As Cal and Ivy climbed back to the surface, the setting sun cast long shadows across the center that had once been a junkyard. But now those shadows fell across a place where the future was being built, one community at a time, powered by unlimited clean energy and guided by the wisdom of a man who had understood that the greatest legacy isn't what you accumulate, but what you give away. The secret had become a gift, and the gift was changing the world.